This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, April 5th, 2023, and I'm in Austin, Texas with John Deere, and I've got Jorge Gerard here with me of John Deere. We're going to talk about tech because you probably don't know this if you're just tuning in, but John Deere is one of the most tech-savvy companies out there. Number one. Number two, I interviewed Deanna last year, and we talked about a lot of the things that you guys were working on. That was like 9 months ago. So what I'd love to hear from you, Jorge, is like maybe an update on what's been happening in the last 9 months. I know the autonomous tractor is finally delivering to some farmers. And of course, you got the new electrification on the construction equipment, which I think is really exciting. And then, what's new in AI, machine learning, computer vision, all the things that make this happen and possible.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, thank you for inviting me to speak about these things. Maybe to frame it, the way I would say it is John Deere is working in many, many different things, but there's four key themes that we saw over the last few days. One of them is automation.
Yeah.
Another one is autonomy, right? Like the fully autonomous 8R tractor. Another one is electrification and what we're doing there. And it's not just electrification, but also alternative power.
Energy, right? Exactly.
And then connectivity. And we have a lot of things that are happening and will be happening in the area of connectivity.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the satellite news because that's actually a big deal. I completely forgot to bring that up. But maybe let's start with that because I think that's the newest news. That's really this event's news in a way, right? So tell us what you're going to do, because right now, just maybe walking the audience over the process, you have 4G and 5G connectivity, right, through a partner on all the machines out there. If they get connectivity, they can connect to the internet, and that's how it works. But that doesn't cover everything, right? There are parts of the US that just don't have that reliable cellular connectivity. So that's where satellite connectivity comes in, correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And our customers and our dealers derive quite a bit of value of that with that connectivity. We can store data that is collected from the agronomy, like rates and what did you exactly end up doing. We can also collect the information around how the machine is doing and proactively respond to failures even before they happen. Right. So there's a lot of value for the customers in having that connectivity, but we need connectivity. And not only in the U.S., but if you think about it worldwide, right? Connectivity is spotty, especially when it comes to rural areas. And a lot of our customers are in rural areas. It's where farms are.
I mean, this is a basic problem that a lot of the world is running into right now. And it's being solved to some extent with some satellite connectivity that's finally getting to a point where it's usable, right?
Yeah, so satellite is the perfect answer to that problem. And what we've done is we've done an RFP. And we've had several companies tell us what they can do on the satellite connectivity. And we've selected a few and we're doing in-depth testing with them. And we're going to be looking to select a partner and going with that solution as a satellite global connectivity, ideally, in the future.
Are you looking at eventually replacing regular cellular connectivity? Or this is just a complement? You're just bulletproofing the system? Because cellular still is pretty solid and is going to be around for a long time. But in my mind, 10 years from now, we're all going to look back and go like every phone will probably have some satellite connectivity and it'll be a standard feature. And in some regions, we won't even have to worry about what kind of cellular connectivity we have. Do you think you guys are going in that direction ideally, or do you think the redundancy is absolutely necessary for another decade at least?
Yeah, my thinking is that this ability to switch, like right now you switch between Wi-Fi and cellular, right? That happens in my phone. Yeah, and by the way, in our tractors, we have cellular and Wi-Fi, right? So it seamlessly switches and selects the best bandwidth and selects the best. I think that cellular is going to be the third option that we're going to be giving customers.
Right. And so that's actually big news. So you're actually trying to find partners right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on things like Starlink, because I think that's, high bandwidth, low Earth orbit. high performance, low latency connectivity. I mean, they're not the only ones, but they're the most developed ones right now. So I'm kind of wondering if this is something you're looking at, if you can speak to that. Of course, if you can't, I get it. But to me, that's actually something that is interesting, because you look at the phone world that my audience is more interested in, and we have quite a few solutions. Apple has their own solution right now and their partner. We have Samsung's doing something, right? We have Bullet Group in the UK, right, doing something with MediaTek. You know, they're kind of following the 3GSM standards here, which are, of course, going to develop into Leo and you know, higher bit rate, low latency networks in the future, but right now are very limited. And then there's Starlink, who is kind of teaming up with T-Mobile and others. So that's kind of why I'm wondering if that's, you think, the solution, or do you think you're looking at just, you know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket?
Yeah, so still TBD. We haven't made that decision for sure. Starlink is one of the companies that is in our list that of companies to evaluate. I think Leos in general have a really nice proposition, right? Where they have high bandwidth, high availability, and good penetration, so that we can use them anywhere. Leos is for sure where we've been looking the most.
Great. And so let's switch over to electrification a little bit, because, you know, you don't have a huge amount of time, but I want to talk about this because that's what I'm very excited about.
Great.
You know, cleaner in terms of emissions is my biggest one. Like, you know, construction equipment and, of course, farm equipment. But it's less of an issue, I think, out in the farm. But in cities, we have a lot of construction going on, right? It creates a lot of noise. It creates a lot of pollution. And, of course, finding a solution. Of course, in a city, there's infrastructure, so you have access to power, you know, more readily than, you know, maybe in the field. So to me, the fact that you're starting with an excavator right now, you have a prototype that you're testing with 120 kilowatt hour battery pack, apparently, from your engineers, which is, you know, for folks, if you don't know what that means, that's bigger than a Tesla battery pack. You know, like the Model S and X have like 100 or so. So that gives you an idea how big that pack is. And it can operate an entire day. That's kind of the goal. That's what you've so far managed to achieve, as, you know, not always on, because obviously, you know, you're in construction site, you stop it, you start it, you stop it. So it's really interesting to me, because that's, I think, going to be a big game changer for the quality of life and allowing construction to happen in cities, you know, with less noise and pollution. And also, of course, the advantage is, you know, you can now fuel with renewable energy, which is a lot easier because potentially you have that option. So there's a lot of things that you're doing there that are really interesting. Also, you have these mobile charging stations that are CCS, DC, fast charge compliant. You're basically big boxes that can basically be containerized or carried on forklifts that contain, you know, I don't know how many kilowatt hours, but that can charge an excavator 2 or 3 times or more. And you can like put them out in the field if necessary. And then you have, of course, the ability to charge on any DC fast charger, like Electrify America, for example. That'd be really funny when I pull up to a station and I see a John Deere excavator on the last spot. I'm going to be very mad. But it's necessary, right? And then the other thing is you guys are doing also the ability to charge, I think, while the vehicle's being transported. That's something else you're looking at, right? Like it's on a trailer being brought somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. You hit it right. And maybe a couple things that I will add is that we're looking, especially for the smaller size vehicles, right? The 100, 150 horsepower or lower. It's a really good fit. And John Deere has made a conscious investment on electrification. And one of the things we did is we acquired a majority stake in this company called Chryso. And this is a company in Austria that makes this battery modules that are liquid cooled, but that make them really well suited because you can control the temperature of the cells really good. And that's one of the big things that affects life, right? And especially when you're discharging them closer to zero, right? That starts eating to life. And the mechanism is because of temperature and temperature management. So having a liquid cool allows us to maintain a very steady temperature in the entire pack, makes the pack last longer, makes it have this bigger duty cycles. And maybe the third thing I'll say is that one of the big things that electric power brings and electric motors brings is torque, right? You get these fast cars with Tesla, and we can use that torque to do real work. Right. If you think about, for example, a loader that is going into a pile, it needs all that torque to go and push into the dirt. And we can
use critically, that. You can decouple the torque, the motor for the hydraulics from the motive motor, the motor moving the vehicle. And right now, that's a big challenge, right?
That's exactly right. You have to, if you're trying to do something with a hydraulic, you need to put your engine all the way to RPM, high RPMs.
That's right.
It makes a lot of noise, lots of fuel wasted because you're needing the hydraulic not to move, right? And now we can decouple it. You need a lot of hydraulic power, then you can put that engine, that hydraulic engine, to work, but you're not moving the propulsion.
And I'm imagining a future where you're even creating multiple hydraulic circuits that are localized at the actuator level. So, you have a pump for this particular cylinder, a pump for this particular cylinder, and then you start having some economies of scale in terms of like weight and also maintenance. If one cylinder fails, you still have the rest of it, things like that. So I think that's another thing that I think is going to happen. In the farm equipment, once you get to that, you're going to have implements that are completely electric. Again, you can run the motors at different speeds than the hydraulics, right? And I think this is why I'm excited, because I can understand from an engineering point of view where you're going with this. And I think that honestly, I'm very gung-ho on electrification, but I think that this is kind of one of those applications that's kind of perfect. It's kind of like the autonomy story for you guys, right?
Yes. I think you're absolutely right? And I think a lot of people go with electrification, battery sustainability, right? And that's a very important message, of course, for sure. But what we've been talking is you make the machine be better because
it's optimization.
Of it. It's optimized. It lasts longer. You make it more torquey so it can do more work. You make it quieter. It's all these advantages that add with each other, right? That gives you much more than just the story about saving in carbon.
And your battery acquisition is also really interesting to me because you're using cylindrical cells. And of course, this new cooling technology, which is going to be really critical because this construction equipment is possibly sitting outside overnight and it needs to work right away when you wake up. It's not like you can precondition the battery and wait 15 minutes.
That's right.
The construction site has to get going now, right? And I think that's another critical part.
And that's right. And it works when it's too hot or too cold in both cases. And construction equipment works when it's too hot and too cold.
Yeah. Last thing I want to quickly touch on is automation, and more specifically, like autonomous automation. So obviously, I got to see your autonomous tractor that was doing tillage at your farm in Gilroy in California, your test farm. And that was really exciting. That was about like February-ish last year, 2022. So it's been a while, but since then you've actually deployed this to farmers now. And I just kind of want to touch on that a little bit, and you can tell us an update maybe on how that's going.
Yeah, that is going really well. We selected this application we call autonomous tillage. Tillage is when you prepare the field for planting. It's typically done at the same time that harvest is happening. So harvest is one of these very intense times where labor is short because you're trying to harvest, move the grain cart, move the grain from the field to the silo, deal the silo. And on top of that, you're trying to till. Right, so there's a big labor crunch, and everybody in the same area is trying to do it at the same time. so it's a very big demand for a solution for tillage, and it's also a nice thing about it is that it's a simpler solution than others, a simpler application than others. Because when you're tilling your field, there's nothing to refill. It's not like a planter where you have to put more seed or more chemical into your sprayer or collect the grain and move it. So it's just all you need to do is drive through your field.
Yeah, it was the lowest hanging fruit for you guys to start. And of course, the technology developed can be pushed beyond that into the next stages of
That's
farming.
Right. So it's a combination of the lowest hanging fruit but also one where there's a lot of pull from people because they don't have the labor to do it. So it's a great place to start. And what has happened maybe since you last saw it a year ago is we've started deploying it to customers. We're now in actually today we're in 6 different states in the Midwest.
Oh wow!
Doing a spring tillage. So we're expanding our operating environment. We now support 3 different crops. We support 2 different implements, and we support 1 tractor. And what you can expect over the next few months of this journey is we're going to be adding more tractors that we support. Right now, we support the tractor called the 8R, which is the most popular among our large tractor family. But we're going to be adding the larger tractor, the 9R, and the track vehicles.
Track vehicles, I love that thing. I got to drive it last summer. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, that's fantastic. How's the response been from the farmers using it right now? Do they love it? I presume they pretty love it.
Yeah, they love it. They love it. We have come up with this video. That's one of our actual testing customers. His name is Doug Nims, and you can hear him talk and the passion that he has when he talks about what this is and how big of a life changer it is for him, is what he says in that video. Yeah, so the response has been phenomenal. So
you're making evangelists out of your customers. That's the best way to do it. But just for the audience, I want to clarify real quick that obviously one of the reasons this is so important is that autonomy in the farm is much more achievable than autonomy on the streets. Right? Because there's less constraints. But because of that, we need that data, because eventually all that data can help us create more autonomy in other places. So, if you guys are wondering, like, I don't care, the farmer's got an autonomous tractor, big deal. Eventually that technology, the machine learning that comes out of that is going to apply to a lot more things that we want, that us consumers want, whether it's stuff that ends up like computer vision for your phone, right? Like the computational photography, or whether it ends up in our cars, right? So I think this is the thing that's got me excited, because to see what kind of industrial applications end up coming back to the consumer side. So Jorge, we should wrap it up, but thank you so much for being on the show and talk to us about the latest John Deere goodness. It's great.
My pleasure, and thank you for you coming over and seeing us and checking on us and what our latest technology is, and bring some of your viewers to.
Absolutely. So folks, stay tuned. I've got the news coming up next. And we're back. And I'm here with Jonathan Casey.
What's going on?
YouTube creator extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire.
Come on. Don't be so modest. So yeah, we are going to chat with you guys about the news and the stuff. We got a bunch of things. It's been a very slow week. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Because it's been kind of crazy.
That's true.
But I'm always worried, like, we're missing something, or like something's going to come out of left field and we're going to be screwed.
All the time.
Oh, man.
Every time I leave the house, I feel like I'm missing something.
So the first thing I want to talk about is OnePlus. They did announce some new products. Some of them are relevant to us. Some of them are not as relevant, but I still think I have a soft spot for the European Nord phones. Like, now this is like a Nord CE3 Lite. It's not that exciting. But at the same time, they did some earbuds, and I got them, but I got so busy I didn't even take them out of the box yet. Do you have them?
No, I don't have them. I actually have the tablet at the house, though, which I know.
I got the tablet too, so that's another thing I have to open up. Are you excited about it?
I am excited about it. I got to see it a little bit in person when they had the event.
Yeah.
And someone actually has one here that I got to play with a little bit. I think it was Edible. I think Edible had
All right, I played with it quite a bit in Europe. You were at... Did you go to Europe?
No, I went to one in New York.
Okay, yeah, that's where I saw you. I was like, I saw you somewhere with a tablet in your hands. That's when we did the hands-ons and stuff. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So basically there's a Nord CE3 Lite, and that's only Europe, of course, because the C is, it's funny because that's how you know it is for me in my brain. I know it's not actually the way it is, but in French, if you say European Union, it's Communauté Européenne, CE. So in my head, anything that has C in it immediately is a European thing.
Okay.
That's how the game happens in my head for remembering.
Okay.
I know it's weird, but all I'm saying is that there is a Nord. And what I thought was cool about this phone, okay, like it's probably not spectacular, but if you look at the price, 329 euros. That's roughly the same in US dollars, so $300-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting a 108 megapixel sensor, which it doesn't mean anything, right? But it's still kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
67 watt charging, which I also think is pretty cool. And trying to figure out what processor this is.
695. Snapdragon
Okay,
695.
so that's not bad, but it's not spectacular. That's starting to get a little old, right?
But it does have a micro SD card slot.
Ooh, and probably has a headphone jack.
More than likely.
Yeah. So I'm kind of pretty happy with that.
For the price, it seems pretty good.
Last year's C2 Lite only had 33 watt charging. And of course, also a lesser camera. Now, I don't think this camera has OIS or anything like that. Let's not get crazy. I'm just bringing it up because last week we talked about the Redmi Note 12 series, which is also something we're not going to get. But I don't know if you know about the Redmi Note series. It's like this magical unicorn of a phone that we can't get, but it gives you 80% of a flagship experience for half or a third of the price every time. I'll give you an example. The Pro Plus model, which is like their $400-ish, $450 model, has a 200 megapixel sensor that's the same as the high-end sensors in the flagships from Samsung with OIS. Now, the ultra wide and the macro are kind of like secondary, right? But it's got OLED, 120 hertz, bezel-less, 1080p, and it's got like Dimensity 1080 or something for like $450.
Which is great. See, I have a Redmi at the house actually.
Is that the one?
No, not that one. But it's a different one. It's a Redmi Note series. Love the phone. Love the hardware. It's the software.
Yeah.
The software
and
kills
not only
me.
that, it's also the updates. It's like you're never going to get updates. Like Xiaomi's, like they've promised updates for the high-end phones, like the 13 Pro and stuff. But I'm like, every time I get one of those, I'm like, just assume 2 years from now you're going to upgrade. You're not going to even try to, you're going to get another phone. You're not going to try to get software for this.
They're basically like throwaway phones.
Yeah. But they're very good throwaway phones.
Yeah. But that's where the Nord lineup is really cool though, because the software experience is really good.
And for those of you watching on Patreon, check out this crazy lime green color. That's dope. Look at it.
It reminds me of the new Samsung color.
Yeah, you're right. And industrial design-wise, with those two camera lenses, it reminds me of that really hot, what was it? OnePlus Nord N20 or N200? The one we got a year and a half ago in the US that was kind of pretty decent for the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm in. I mean, I'm not going to get this phone, obviously, but yeah. Well, the thing that's like a little bummer though, it's an LCD screen. So it's 120 hertz, 1080p, which is fine. It's 6.72 inches, but I don't know, IPS. I want OLED. Give me 60 hertz OLED. That phone that I'm talking about, the N25G or whatever, which one? I can't remember. It's N200, N20. It had a 60 hertz OLED.
But maybe, just maybe, with the savings of them not putting OLED in it, maybe the camera's going to be better.
Yeah, that's quite possible, actually. Yeah, you're right. Let's see what else. Okay, and then the earbuds. So the Nord 2 earbuds, this is actually pretty cool. I think they're $20 or $30 more at $60 than the previous ones.
Yep.
But now you get active noise cancellation.
Yep.
Which honestly is kind of must have. And for that kind of money, I haven't tried them yet, obviously, but here's the thing. It's BBK Group. And Realme makes a bunch of earbuds as well. The current one are the Realme Buds 3, I think, and they're okay. But the Realme Buds 2 prior to that are $50 on Amazon. You can still buy them today in the US. And they sound fantastic. They have decent battery life. They have active noise canceling. And they are, I think the only thing you miss out from a really high-end pair is you don't get wireless charging or something but for $50 they're amazing. So I'm willing to bet that OnePlus can make a pair of earbuds that's just as good.
Oh yeah. And the fact that they have active noise cancellation is a major win.
Oh my god, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty happy with this announcement.
Hopefully they're comfortable.
Yeah, that's a challenge. They look a little bulkier, they have that same design as the OnePlus Nord Buds last year did, which is a little chunky. Whereas the Realmes are much more sleek. They look like AirPods, basically. But look, this is about as exciting as the news gets this week. So, but I mean, look, the thing is, bulky. Right?
They are pretty bulky.
Yeah, and that's what they were like last year. The industrial design looks almost identical to last year. And, the reason I'm bringing up that, to me, the reason I'm excited about these phones is flagships, of course. I've got a Xiaomi 13 Pro right now. It's freaking awesome. Some of you are rocking the Oppo Find X6 Pro. I don't have one yet, but I also just got the Honor Magic 5 finally. So all these phones are amazing, but I kind of like to look into what the price points at $200 to $400, I think is a really interesting sweet spot price point. Because a lot of people, not in the US, because a lot of people buy their phones subsidized, but in other markets like India and stuff, and I've got a bunch of folks listening from all over the world, they really are pushing the envelope in these segments, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. Because the cheaper flagships get, the better entry-level phones get. Because it's a trickle-down effect.
Totally. Trickle down. So this is the news. Now, we're getting the OnePlus Nord Buds 2.
Yeah, they are coming to the US, it looks like.
So that's exciting. So stay tuned. I'll let you know on the next podcast once I get a chance to listen to them a little bit. I'm still rocking the OnePlus Buds Pro 2 or 2 Pro, whatever they are, the higher end ones. Mm-hmm. Really like them. Once I EQ'd them the way I like them, very happy with them.
I love the aesthetics. The aesthetics.
And they look super dope. I've got the green ones too.
Me too. They look really good.
So nice.
These remind me of like the old Jawbone.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
It totally is. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So, that's kind of one thing that we wanted to talk about today was these announcements. I'm kind of curious what other cameras on this thing. Let's see. We have probably a selfie camera that I'm wondering if there's a second sensor in the back. It looks like there is, but I'm wondering what it is.
It says there's a 3x lossless zoom.
Okay, so that's interesting because, so I know exactly what sensor they're using. They're actually not using a shit sensor because it turns out that I played with the Realme 10 series. Realme 10 Pro and Pro Plus both had that 108 megapixel sensor with lossless zoom.
Yeah, it should be the same sensor that they used in the older Galaxy S21 and S22.
I think it's more affordable, and I think that was a Samsung sensor.
It was a Samsung sensor.
Anyway, the point is that what's cool about it, like the iPhone and the Pixel 7 are doing the 2x zoom by literally cropping the sensor down. Mm-hmm. They're doing that instead of 9:1 pixel binning, they're cropping in. So you're getting 3x zoom.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to lose some light, right? So in low light, it's not going to be as good. Mm-hmm. But I was blown away by the quality of the photos came out of the Realme 10 Pro and 10 Pro Plus. Amazing.
Yeah.
So if it's anything like that, that is dope. And the other thing is that does not have OIS, that sensor, for sure. So that eliminates that. It probably has a macro as a second.
It has a 2 megapixel macro and a 2 megapixel depth assist sensor.
Oh, God. Totally sticker cams is what I call them.
Yeah,
they might as well be stickers.
They're both useless.
Yeah, who cares?
They should have just put an ultra wide on there.
And then what's the battery size on this thing? Oh, 5,000. Not bad.
It's pretty big.
So yeah, look, I think this is good. And with that color, I kind of almost want to ask Spencer if he can somehow get me one. By the way, I have other OnePlus things to play with right now, so I'm kind of busy with that. The next thing on the menu here is actually more exciting to me because, I actually had this conversation with my guest last week. There was rumors of the Edge 40 series from Moto coming soon. And then we finally have an announcement yesterday, I think, for global markets of the Moto Edge 40 Pro. And, I don't know if you know this, I don't know if you've been following the foreign Moto Edge series versus the American kind of screwed up version that we get because Verizon cuts out all the features. But the stuff they're getting abroad is really good.
I'm going to be honest. When it comes to Motorola, I haven't followed them since the Z4 series. When they were
a long time ago.
Yeah, because they had the mods and that was when they were truly innovating in my opinion. And since then they just kind of I don't know, they kind of fell off. But
they did, but I think that's mostly because we're not getting the good stuff in the US.
Probably why.
And you look at the Edge and Edge Plus that we get every year or so, and they're really the, previously the 30 series and then the year before the 10 series or the 20 series. They're the same, those phones, but then Verizon takes them and removes the metal chassis and puts a plastic frame, removes the OIS, removes the wireless charging,
loads them with bloatware,
and then adds another Dimensity chip so that they can have the millimeter wave like the 1080. Yeah. And so now you're losing out on the flagship chipsets. No, don't get me wrong. The 1080 is a really good chipset, but it's they're literally completely changing the phone from what it was abroad. And you look at this thing, and last year's 30 Pro was really nice. The 30 Ultra had a 200 megapixel sensor, was one of the first to have that crazy, Samsung sensor. Mm-hmm. And this thing, look at this. Okay, 6.67 AMOLED, 165 hertz. That's total overkill.
But that's incredible.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Because the only phone so far that I've tested with a 165 hertz is Red Magic, and a year ago, which is a gaming phone. So it means you can use this thing for gaming. It has, of course, 1080p display.
60 megapixel selfie camera.
Yeah, that's, you know how I feel about that.
I know,
that's going to output 16 megapixels, 15 megapixels, probably 4:1 pixel binning.
Yeah.
But it's good for low light, right?
Yep.
But you see, the thing about Moto is that I am never sure they're going to get the cameras right. like they're always a little below average, even with their European products that are really nice, or global products, or rest of the world products.
Even back in the day, like when I used to follow Motorola a lot, it was hit or miss.
Exactly. So 250 megapixel shooters in the back. There's a large 1/1.55 inch sensor with OIS. f/1.9, not that great. Pretty narrow field of view on that ultra wide, right? 117.
Yeah,
I like 120 or higher. But it has autofocus, which means it's not a fake macro. It's going to use real macro for autofocus on the ultra wide.
That's very nice.
Yeah, that's something that Verizon would just have removed. They were like, let's forget it. Like, just add a little 2 megapixel crap cam.
Yeah. Or depth assist.
I know, it just drives me nuts. And then we've got a 12 megapixel telephoto. 2x now. That's 2X. Not spectacular. No OIS. So this is a very similar setup to what we have on the OnePlus 11, actually. Mm-hmm. But my gut is the OnePlus 11 will take better pictures because it's the BBK Group's image processing. Or the Oppo pipeline with the Hasselblad stuff. Still, 1/1.56, which is basically the same as this.
Yeah,
right?
basically
Similar.
the same.
All right. So now, what else we got? So 4,600 milliamp hour battery. That could be better, I guess. But wireless charging at 15 watt, not too crazy. What's the wired charging speed on this thing? Well, typically they've done 125 watts on their high-end models abroad.
Well, it says 0 to 50% in 7 minutes, giving you a full charge in under 20 minutes.
So that's the 125 watt.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's the 125 watt.
That is incredible.
That is pretty good. And then, like, look at it. UFS 4, LPDDR5X, lots of storage and RAM, IP68.
That's awesome.
This is what I'm saying. Like, we don't get this.
Yeah.
Like, they're just going to screw us over.
Yep.
So, I know we talked about this phone as a theoretical thing last week, and now it's actually there. And I was like, I feel kind of weird having to talk about the same thing twice and having the same rant about how Moto gives us the crap stuff. But, I've heard rumors. I'm not sure this is true, but my little finger tells me that we're going to get the equivalent phones this year in the US. That Moto has listened to us. And whether Verizon might still be getting their own models, but the unlocked models that we're going to be able to buy are going to be non-decontented. Now, is that true? Stay tuned. I don't know.
Hopefully. I mean, the only thing I can see here is the price. It's kind of expensive.
That's in Europe, and again, it's like $900. Like, think about it. This Pixel 7 Pro I'm holding is the same price.
But why would you not choose that over this?
Okay.
Updates, camera.
Updates are going to happen. The software is going to be great. You know that.
But not as good as that.
Well, it depends on your perspective. I personally prefer the Pixel 2, but I think a lot of people like the pure AOSP experience that Moto delivers. Okay. They have a few things like the chop and whatever, right, for the flashlight. Mm-hmm. But I think that some people argue, I want kind of more like Pixels become very customized, actually, if you think about it, compared to stock. So some people want the stock. And, there's some people just like the design or whatever. Like, I think you're right, it's a tough call. But also, in many of these markets, this is not available.
True. But Samsung is.
But Samsung is.
And that's a tough sale.
But I don't like Samsung One UI, so I'd rather have the Moto software, honestly.
Okay.
So, I can see there's a spot for it.
Yeah.
It's a tough sell, especially at this price. But at the same time, you look at the prices of other flagships in Europe, they're much higher than that. Like we're looking at it like converting to US dollars.
Yeah.
Based on the subsidized prices we get here. People over there, a lot of people don't buy subsidized.
True.
And so, of course, there it says 125 watt charging at the beginning. See, this has actually already been out in China as the Moto X40 because the X is the Edge in China.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So you always kind of know when they announce the X, you're like, okay, that's going to be the Edge abroad or like global model. And then we're going to get like some terrible Verizon modded version. And then this year, apparently, I don't know if it's true, but 165 hertz, as much as I'm kind of excited about the fact that, it's cool technically, but I'm not sure, is it really necessary? Like, so few games support anything over 120 now.
True.
Like every time I review Red Magic, I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice, but like, 3 games worked or something.
Right. I think the next push is going to be ray tracing.
Yeah, true.
So, and this supports it.
Yeah, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
So that'll support ray tracing, which is great.
Yeah, so this is this is what I want to see from Moto. Like, I'm sorry, like, even if you don't sell a lot of them, to play in the game, you need a flagship.
Mm-hmm.
That's zero compromises. And this is, at least on paper, a zero compromise flagship. I mean, you could argue the telephoto could be a little better.
Yeah.
Right? But my point is, they're trying, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just feel like when they weren't trying, it was just annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Here's a really obscure one. So I don't know how familiar with Meizu. Okay. So do you remember when Xiaomi kind of came out of nowhere? You remember way back, like CS 2010-ish? We're talking like, you might not have been following back then.
No.
You weren't. Okay. So this is a little history lesson for everyone. For those of you who weren't around then. So right around the time that, like, all the Android phones were basically like HTC, or, like there was like the Google stuff,
And HTC, LG,
LG, Moto, and of course Samsung.
Yep.
But, there was like a bunch of choices, but they were pretty limited. The Chinese weren't really playing yet. Like, Huawei wasn't really a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they started kind of looking into making phones then. I remember going to the Huawei booth in like 2013 and looking at their phones and going like, wow, like these are getting good. But like at the time they were nobody,
Right.
And then Xiaomi was one of the first to really push the price down.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually, the original Xiaomi phone, the Mi, was like kind of like, when Google did their first phone, right? It was like a bit of a revelation because they're like, oh, we can make a phone that affordable, that's that good on spec, kind of like the OnePlus One, but before the OnePlus One.
Right.
So around the same time, this company Meizu came out of nowhere and did the same thing. So Meizu and Xiaomi were kind of head to head for many years. And then Meizu just lost the plot and Xiaomi became a giant.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Huawei became a giant too.
Mm-hmm.
So by like 2015, 2016 or so, Meizu was out of the game. They still existed. They still made phones every year. They made a flagship and another mid-range maybe every year, but nobody knew about them. And you really have to be in China to get them. But the reason I brought it up this week on the podcast is because, as you know, I cover cars and EVs and car tech. So Geely is a Chinese car manufacturer. They are the parent company of Volvo. They bought Volvo a few years ago, and they make the Polestar cars as well, the electric cars.
Yeah.
So Geely bought the Meizu brand. They bought Meizu, but not just the brand, the IP, everything. Like, I think it was like 6 months or a year ago. And at the time, I covered it on the podcast. I was like, everybody was scratching their heads. Like, the car people were like, what? And the tech people, like, if you talk to like Richard Lite and Gadget, who's in Hong Kong, who's a good friend of mine who used to work there when I worked there. He followed Meizu, like, he was like super passionate about it. He's like, what? Like, we're all kind of, but it's the same thing as, Huawei took their Harmony OS and put it in a car.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's like Google put their Android Automotive in the Polestar, right?
Right.
It's the kind of same deal. So what Geely wanted was, like, for China, they wanted a mobile OS experience on their car that was really polished. And they're like, we're going to buy Meizu. And Flyme is the OS. It's a variation of Android. So they bought it for the IP, but then we thought they were going to stop making phones. But they just proved us wrong. They have a flagship called the Meizu 20 series.
That's pretty cool.
And so I just had to, like, so Geely owns, basically Volvo and Polestar, and Flyme is the OS that they're running on the cars. But they decided, hey, let's make a flagship phone. That way we have an ecosystem play,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they've made phones before, so it was pretty straightforward for them. But it's just they didn't sell. They weren't very popular anymore. This thing looks pretty dope. It's got kind of this squarish design, kind of like the Red Magic 8 Pro, which is really kind of squared off.
The specs are incredible.
And look at the numbers, right? So we're getting like a LTPO OLED at 120 hertz, 6.81. That's a big screen. The resolution is really wonky. It's like between Quad HD and 1080p. It's like, 1368 by 3192. I'll never remember that, guys.
No.
And then there's a smaller, the regular one gets a smaller OLED at 144 hertz. But I'm mostly interested in the Pro. And if you look at the specs here.
Well, it looks like there's 3 models. There's the Meizu 20, the Meizu 20 Infinity, and then the Meizu 20
Oh, yeah, there's
Pro.
the Infinity. You're right. Look at that. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty crazy stuff, right? I'm looking at the Infinity has the 50 megapixel main sensor, but it downgrades the ultra wide and telephoto to 12 megapixels. So I guess the Pro is still the highest one. The Pro has three 50 megapixel sensors. It's not clear what kind of telephoto it has though.
Isn't that's what the new Oppo has? Is 50 megapixels.
Yeah, it's true. The Find X6 Pro.
Yeah.
Doesn't I want to say the Honor Magic 5 also has 350.
But the difference is the Oppo, I think they're all 1 inch.
No,
they're not.
Only the main. The other two are the 890 that's in the OnePlus 11.
Okay, then I don't know what I'm thinking.
There's no phone right now that has the 3 1-inch sensors.
Okay.
I wish that was the case.
I'm an idiot.
No, don't say that. Like, I feel like you're right because it's an IMX, I think the 890, which is the 1/1.56, still really big.
Yeah, they're using that for the telephoto.
But I think the thing that makes the Oppo Find X6 Pro so unique is that the f-stop on the telephoto is insane.
Yeah.
Right? It's super
That's what
fast.
it is. They're using 3 main cameras for different things.
That's correct.
That's what it is. It's not
3 main
not
cameras, but 1 inch is the main sensor.
Yes.
So they're going crazy.
That's what it is.
So this is definitely a triple 50. And, I mean, these phones are, again, like I know I tend to more focus on, when I talk about Chinese phones, focus on the global phones like the Moto Edge 40 Pro. But this, I couldn't not talk about this just because I'm like, this is Geely and it's so weird that it looked like they were buying the business and they were going to disappear as a phone brand and now they're going to survive. So I'm sure Richard's super happy in Hong Kong.
The price is really good.
Yeah, so they probably highly subsidized. They probably have some sort of like tie-in with their services, like they do. Xiaomi did that too. Like that's how Xiaomi got famous. They have offered all these services, like the entire ecosystem, like humidifiers and smart locks and smart lights and things, and
right.
It's all subsidized by that. So I think that's the Meizu play, and of course now they have the car stuff. So.
Actually, but the Infinity is the more expensive model.
So that's interesting. I wonder what makes it so special. The cameras are worse.
The bezels are slimmer.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, yeah. So Infinity as in like the display is...
Yeah, like Infinity display.
Ha!
Yeah, they're...
Fascinating.
2.48 millimeter borders on all four sides.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. It looks like the Red Magic 8 Pro, which has like the slimmest bezel. I measured them. They're like absolutely ridiculous. Like 1.6 millimeters.
That's insane.
I've got it in my bag if you want to look at it, if you've never seen it.
It's check it out.
Unreal. Like every time I see that phone, I'm like, it's a phone from 5 years from now.
I'll have to check it out. That's
kind of insane. Yeah, so April 3rd in China if you're there, guys. I don't know. I don't think I'd buy this phone, but I think it's cool to know that they made it. They survived.
That's cool.
All right, so this is interesting. I don't know how much of a gamer you are. I'm not, even though I worked in video games for 2 decades.
Yes.
Are you excited about this?
Yes.
So what's your take? Like, what's your initial thought when you saw this?
So I have some interesting thoughts on this. Edabong and I got into it.
Oh, man, we should have had him come with us to talk about this. So what was his take?
Obviously, it's going after the Steam Deck.
Oh, of course.
But see, I had a different take on it. Because I was like, it has Windows on it. So I feel like it's going after the Windows portable devices and not the Steam Deck. But the way they marketed this, like it's going into Best Buy.
Uh-huh.
So since it's being sold at Best Buy, a lot of people walk into Best Buy, they're like, where's the Steam Deck? We don't have a Steam Deck, but we have this, the Asus Ally, which is actually more efficient. It has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, so it's going to give you better battery life. It's going to be, I don't know, like it's a really interesting device. And I can see this being a hit. And from what Asus has said, pricing is going to be right there. Like I think they're hinting at like around like $599, $699 starting price.
Ooh, that's aggressive.
Yes.
Wow. And so Windows 11, 1080p display, 120 hertz, AMD APU. Wow.
Yeah, it looks really impressive.
So we don't know too much yet, but I will link to the Verge's article because it's really hilarious. That's how I discovered this because I wasn't really paying attention. We've had a really busy week here in Austin. We're in Austin right now for John Deere's Tech Summit. Mm-hmm. And so we've both been pretty hectic. I didn't even know this until I started looking for this week's news earlier on the bus. And, my gut feeling is like, this could be very interesting in the sense that like, there's also the Razr, right? Like that's an Android thing. but it's another portable gaming device. There's so many now.
Yes.
And they're all different ecosystems. It's kind of like really weird. So, and then of course, Nintendo, right? Switch. I mean, it's a completely different market. But I'm just saying, like,
but yeah, a lot of handheld consoles.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then you look at, the Red Magic, and of course, Asus makes Android gaming phones, ROG phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think it's a fun time to be a gamer.
Yeah. The one amazing thing about the Asus is the size. If you look at it compared to the Steam Deck,
here, show the Patreon.
Like, the difference in size is awesome. So the Asus is going to be way more portable.
Oh my God, it is. Look at that. It's smaller than the Steam Deck. Mm-hmm. Amazing. The story of the Verge was funny because they said they totally screwed up the launch because it was like an April Fool. It looked like an April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
And but apparently it wasn't. And like don't do that.
No.
Don't, marketing people, don't do that.
Yeah, don't release anything on April's Fool Day. Like don't do that.
Don't do that. Because people are not going to take you seriously, and then on one hand, when it actually happens, they'll be happy, but they'll be disappointed with your tactics.
Right.
They'll be like, "You played me. You suck."
Right. There's just too many jokes that day. Way too many.
Oh, it was so bad. So bad. So yeah, we don't know much else, right? We don't know what games are gonna run on this. Like,
we don't even
what
technically
store it's gonna use.
Well, it's Windows, so you can download whatever
Steam,
store you want.
I suppose, yeah.
Well, you can download Steam. You can download Battle.net. Like you can download whatever you want because it's Windows.
Yeah.
So you have full control over whatever gaming streaming service you want, or just gaming service.
I'm kind of excited about this, especially because it's just kind of heating up. And I remember when, like we were all like, oh, the other thing is, sorry, that's the other thing. Before I say what I was thinking, what I remember, the other rumor, I haven't put it in the show notes, but is that there is a PlayStation Portable coming. This is another rumor that happened this week. It's very soon.
If they bring that back, that's going to be
ARM-based, apparently. So what I'm trying to say, why I'm excited right now is because not only is choice, but I worked at Sony on Vita and PSP. And, as a developer support engineer, I had to help the developers launch products on that, launch games on it. And it's always been such a delightful platform to have a device in your hands that has all the stuff. It's all integrated. You don't have to buy anything extra. You don't have to waste your phone's battery. And, back then, of course, there was just Wi-Fi, but now you can have 5G. And I'm not, again, a hardcore game, even though I worked in video games. I just did it because it was challenging from a tech perspective. Mm-hmm. But I, of course, appreciate games, and I appreciate hardware that can run games well. So I'm just like, this is awesome. Like, this feels like we have a totally new, renaissance of portable game consoles.
I mean, that's the future of gaming, in my opinion.
For sure.
It is something that you can grab and go. And to this day, the PlayStation Vita is still one of my favorite handheld consoles. I love that. I have one at the house. I still play it for Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII.
Do you still play it?
Yeah.
And if you look at how, it was super advanced this time. OLED screen, there's so many things it did first.
Such a good console.
I was so bummed when they discontinued that, But I remember, because I have always been a huge ARM proponent. I have wanted an ARM MacBook for over a decade before they did the M1. I have one, I had a 12-inch MacBook, the underpowered Intel one, because I wanted that form factor.
Yep.
And I was willing to suffer through this kind of performance, right? But just because, and so, of course, I got an M1, now I have an M2. I'm recording on an M2 right now, MacBook Air. But I was even back in the days of PS, at the time I worked at Sony as PS3, every consoles and PCs were super powerful compared to the handheld and the ARM stuff, compared to what phones could do. Nowadays phones are insane, but back then, this is 2000, I worked there 2008. So I saw the iPhone launch while I was working at Sony, right? And I knew, because I was already blogging, I knew ARM was the future. And when Sony announced that they're making an ARM-based machine, the Vita, I was like, oh, wow, they're getting it. Because I thought they were going to make a custom chip or they're going to do some Intel BS. And I was like, no, because you're never going to get the efficiency out of it. And then they did it right.
Vita was incredible. I love the Vita. And then they just discontinued it. I'm like, why, Sony?
I don't understand why. I think they got distracted with that PSVR stuff and with the Move, right?
Yeah.
And
the
like,
Move was,
and the
it was stupid.
yeah, of course it was.
It was stupid.
I had to work on that thing. Oh, it was such a pain.
It was.
And then, of course, PS4, and now with PS5. I mean, I don't know. I've always been a huge Sony fan, even though I don't think they make a lot of good decisions.
Yeah.
Like I love the Xperia phone simply because even though they don't have the best cameras in terms of like, point and shoot.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you. I get eaten up on
Do
my
you
videos.
really?
Oh, they attack me all the time in the comments. They're like, they're the best phones.
Dude, look, I think that if you can put aside the I want instant gratification. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm using a Pixel. I love it. I have an iPhone. I love it. I have, Samsung S23 Ultra, and I love it. And I love the fact that I can mash that button and get really good photos. But there is something about being able to like do the old school way, and fine tune and tweak. And because it's an alpha interface, I kind of love it because I'm a Sony person for the cameras.
See, and I see things a little bit differently. I'm like, phones are meant to give you something fast.
Yes. But to me, this is why I kind of love Sony, because they were making, $1,500 phones, like $1,200 phones that are just not practical for everyday use. You know what I'm saying? They're really just like, oh, we made a phone that is really an alpha camera and, like, it's just like, and they still do it. Like, look, LG went running away from mobile and they could have totally, with all the microwaves and dishwashers and washers and fridges and TVs that they sell, they could have sustained that mobile business even at a loss for another decade if they wanted to. We could have had that rolling phone by now.
True.
And Sony doesn't shy away. They're like, we don't make anything but flagships, so maybe another mid-range in there. But like, we're just gonna do crazy shit, and we're just gonna do it our own way. I love that. I don't necessarily wouldn't buy one, but it's interesting.
Like, okay, so I have two main, and I know we're getting off topic, but I have like two main problems with Sony Xperia phones. And that's it. Their hardware is incredible. The display is incredible. The software is incredible. It's the camera. If you want to have that manual interface and be able to take like that alpha experience to a phone, cool. But you should have a good auto mode. You're Sony. You make 90% of smartphone sensors. Like,
so that's kind of why, that's the thing that like they kind of now in 2023 have no excuse to not have some sort of mode that gives you the computational stuff.
Right. And they have more computational photography in their new Alpha series cameras than they do their phones. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
But at the same time, if you think about it and you look at what their phones bring to the table, they have everything. Wireless charging, a headphone jack,
everything.
Micro SD. Like, you're not making any compromises except in the software.
Just
like
the camera.
The camera software.
Yeah. And also, why do you have to have like 4 apps or 3 camera apps? Like, why can't it just be 1 or 2? Like, they overcomplicate the process.
That's what I'm saying. It's typical Sony. They mess it up. But at the core, there's some good stuff there.
Oh yeah, I love the phone. It's just the camera. Like, I can't do the camera. But I know that's off topic. But
no, it's not. It's totally on topic. I feel like I just love the fact that they're just going with it. They're like, we're just going to do our own thing. And just no questions. Like, we're just going to do our own thing. And like, we're going to sell ridiculous phones for ridiculous money. And we're going to sell 12 of them. And they still do it. They're just like, whatever, we sell enough PlayStations and enough TVs to compensate for it.
Which is great. I mean, I will say the Xperia 1 Mark IV was the best phone that they have made for computational photography. It actually did a decent job.
It does a decent job.
Yeah.
And I really love going into manual mode and shooting with those things. Like, it's not as good, obviously, as any of the real alpha cameras, but man, it's so liberating. Like, you see the dynamic range on that sensor. And yeah, of course, HDR is totally always helpful. But like, you're like, wow, like, how do they manage to achieve that with such a small, relatively speaking, sensor? So I'm actually wondering, how they did the Xperia, what was it, the I or whatever? Like the
Xperia
Pro I that had the quote unquote 1-inch sensor that was actually cropped. Like, I want them to use their IMX 989, the one that is used, the 1-inch sensor that's in all the phones right now.
And actually use the 1-inch size.
Can you put this in the Xperia 1 Mark V, please?
Or just use the RX100 1-inch sensor and don't crop in. Just use the full sensor.
Exactly.
Like that was my problem. It's like you're marketing this phone as a 1-inch sensor, and it's not. And a lot of people fell for it.
I know.
Oh
man.
But it was a good phone. I did a video on it. It was a good phone.
It was a really good phone.
But it's just the camera.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited about this gaming thing simply because I don't know, it's cool. And of course Asus, in terms of hardware, they're gonna do it right.
Yes.
Like they're not gonna mess this up.
And they're gonna have good customer support. And that's a major win.
100%. The last thing I want to talk about, and we can spend a bit of time on this because I think it's something we should celebrate. The cell phone turns 50. Okay, let's be more specific. The first cell phone call was 50 years old, like 2 days ago or something. I can't wrap my head around that. Like,
yeah, that's crazy.
That
is crazy.
Like, and this is amazing. Martin Cooper worked at Moto back in the 70s, and he was like, what if we make a phone? Like back then they had radio phones. In the 50s and 60s, they had radio phones. The way they worked was there was one big antenna downtown, and then one at a time somebody could connect with a big antenna from a car, like a little thing, like a box of electronics in the trunk. And it was basically like a walkie-talkie. It's completely analog. You could tune in on it if you had like a scanner or something. And you would make phone calls. They would connect you to the central phone system. And that was called a radio phone. And then he was like, what if instead of one big antenna that covers the whole city, we put a bunch of small antennas and we put them in these hexagonal cells, right, next to one another. And we have a set of frequencies for each cell. And we switch the radio frequency on the car radio to match the cell. And as it goes, it's always connected to two minimum, sometimes three, ideally three, and it can switch between them seamlessly. So you're still talking, and that was the breakthrough. And then, of course, that went digital, right, with 2G, and then we got data and all that, and now here we are, 5G. But it's a core technology that actually I think came from the military originally. I believe that in the 60s, the U.S. military started experimenting with cell-based communication to battlefield-proof the radio communications, because if you have multiple cells and your big antenna is taken out, the multiple cells fix that problem, right? You lose a cell, you're okay because there's two cells next to it. So if you have a bunch of troops that have a radio and they can relay around it, it's like bulletproof, right? Basically. And I think he took that idea and was like, what if we apply this to like our existing tech, and then let's make it small. Small at the time, was from suitcase to kind of like the size of a little purse to the Dynatac that everybody knows. You can see, show the folks on Patreon. Martin Cooper is quite the character. If you ever watch an interview with him, I've met him in person I think once in passing, but he's a very, very friendly guy, very down to earth, very accessible, brilliant man. And, he has some really interesting takes on the history of the cell phone since then. Yeah, show them that. Yeah. So I'm excited about this, honestly. Like 50 years is something like we've built, like you and I to some extent, because we don't just cover phones, but we've built everything we do is because of this.
Yeah, because of cell phones and stuff. Yeah. Cases, phones, I got started because of cases and screen protectors. Yeah, but still, all goes back to the phone.
Absolutely. And what was your first cell phone? Actually, let's talk about that.
Oh, first smartphone? Or
no, the first time you had a cell phone.
First cell phone was a Nokia. Yeah, I think everybody was like a Nokia.
And do you remember how old you were and what year that was roughly?
I think I was like 13. 14, I had to beg my mom for it, and it was only because I had to stay at home by myself while she worked, and she wanted to keep tabs on me.
And so what was that, like in the 90s, 2000s?
I think late 90s, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah, so that makes sense, because that would have been a Nokia back then. That would be like one of those Nokia,
the ones that last forever.
Yeah, the ones you can destroy. That you'll break the tiles on the floor before you break the Nokia phone.
Yep, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, my first one was actually a Sony. I was on ClearNet in Canada, which became TELUS, the current network. ClearNet was a CDMA network that was only in cities, and it was CDMA, so it was digital. So I never had an analog phone. Actually, no, wait a minute. I had a MicroTac very briefly, but it wasn't mine.
I never
So
heard
the
of that.
MicroTac, remember the StarTac? Everybody knows the StarTac, right? The really small folding, like the Razor before the Razor.
Yeah.
Before that was the MicroTac. And the MicroTac, just Google it, you'll see. The MicroTac kind of like, once you see it, you'll recognize, you'll be like,
Micro.
TAC.
there
You go. So show the class real quick. All right. So it's kind of like the proto StarTac. You can see how they got to the StarTac next, right? Like they moved the keyboard to the flap. This was like a flap that was like spring loaded. They moved the keyboard, the keypad to that, and then you had the start, and then miniaturized it. You got StarTac. And the StarTac, by the way, became eventually a GSM phone. Was actually a digital phone, but StarTac was an analog phone.
StarTac.
Yeah. So there you go, StarTac.
StarTac.
So I had a MicroTac very briefly, but it wasn't mine. And then I had a Sony CDMA phone, and then I traded that in for a Nokia on the same network. And then I had a Sanyo. The Sanyo is when I moved to the US, because I moved from Canada to the US, and it was on Sprint, CDMA as well. And it was the thinnest phone at the time that you could buy. That's why somehow I was totally fixated on this. So this is like 2002 or something. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, like when I went to the Sprint store to get a number and my current number now, actually. And I was like, okay, so there's the super thin Sanyo, there's the Sanyo with a camera, and then there's the Sanyo with a color screen. And I was like, I think I want the super thin. So I got the super thin. And then that's when my fashion started happening. Like, I was like, oh, look, like I bought an iPod, one of the second gen, the one that still had Firewire. And I was like, this is all going to merge. Like they have cameras already on the phones. Like they're really bad, but like this is eventually all going to merge. Like we're going to have a computer in our pockets, not just a phone, not just a phone that can play music or a phone that can take crappy pictures. I could see the writing on the wall, and I knew BlackBerry people. Some people had the BlackBerries already, like the very early ones. And I was like, they could do email. I was like, all of this is I want to write about this, right? So I started blogging. But what's interesting is that in my research or blogging of reading all the other blogs and whatever, I was like, oh, GSM is the way to go. I don't want to be on a proprietary system. I want SIM cards. I want to be able to switch phones. So that's how I ended up with a Sony Ericsson T68i.
Oh, man.
Do you remember that one? Color screen, Bluetooth. It had GPRS data, and I could tether it because I was on VoiceStream, which became T-Mobile. VoiceStream was a GSM network that was one of the first to give you packet switch data, which is GPRS, which is the precursor to Edge, and then 3G. Right. So I could remember I had a computer at the time, and I would Bluetooth tether it to my phone at like 56 kilobits per second, 128 kilobits per second before Edge, so slower than that. But because the T68i was one of the smallest phone with a color screen and Bluetooth and GPRS, I bought it. And I bought it unlocked. And I put my SIM in, and it was the hallelujah moment. I was like, I can now have any phone with this SIM card. And so I went from there to the Walkman phone, the Sony Ericsson W800 or whatever. And that one had music playback, but had a 2 megapixel camera with autofocus. The thing was, it had autofocus. And I took some amazing photos of that thing. I mean, today they're not looking that great, but they're looking better than you'd think, because there was a big lens and a big sensor.
Right.
And that's how it got me started. And then, of course, from there I went to Symbian. Smartphones was Nokia. And never looked back. And here I am now, being a total nerding with you about phones. This is so good. But yeah.
But speaking of Motorola, though, since,
this guy?
Yeah.
Martin.
Man, Motorola was like so groundbreaking back then. Like,
I know.
The Motorola Atrix.
Yes. Oh, I was at CS when that launched. I was working with Engadget. I was in Nilay at the time. Nilay and I covered it. Who's the editor-in-chief of The Verge. And we were like freaking out. Like, I remember he's like, Miriam, can you believe this is happening? And I'm like, yes, it's got a laptop attached to it. Oh my God.
That was DeX before DeX.
Totally.
I mean, incredible. The Motorola Droid, the original Droid.
I had it. I bought it. It was amazing.
It was either that or the iPhone for me. I was like, I'm going Droid. Yeah. And I did not regret it.
I bought the Nexus as 6 months later.
Yep.
The first Nexus. But yeah, the Droid was so good. And then before that, the Razor, the actual original Razor.
The Razor.
Like that
incredible
phone Like, I don't know if some of you listening are a bit younger, you probably don't understand that subsidized from a carrier, a dumb phone, but super thin one, made of metal, which was really dope, super stylish, was $600 in 2000 and whatever that was. Like, that's with like probably $1,300 today.
Yeah.
Subsidized. So you have to pay that price to get the phone plus the monthly fee after that.
A dumb phone.
A dumb phone.
Yeah.
So I don't think people understand how lucky they are to have what they have now.
And then later on, Motorola had the Moto X, which was still to this day one of my favorite phones
ever. Oh, the Moto
ever.
X was so incredible.
So incredible.
Like, it was so big, remember?
Yep.
Like, and now we're like...
But the customization aspect, you go on the website, you could choose bamboo, you could choose walnut. So good.
So good.
And then now Moto's like
They lost the plot.
Yeah, I hate it.
They just lost the plot. And I think a lot of it to do complacency and, at least in North America, going in bed with just one carrier. Like, they're just exclusives with Verizon.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't hate Verizon. I just feel like they kind of screwed Moto over, and Moto didn't have like the balls, I guess, to like fight back or something. At least in this market. And now they're mediocre because of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I hope they come back because they have the potential. They have the products. They still have the mojo, I think.
Yeah.
They just need to bring it. That's why I don't want to be too negative about this, you know, this Moto Edge 40 Pro. I'm kind of hoping it'll be at least close.
Yeah, I hope it does good. I really do.
And maybe they can price it more aggressively for the US.
That'd be great.
You know?
That would be great. But
yeah.
Man, Moto used to innovate so much. And
What did you get as your first kind of smartphone?
So technically, it was the Sidekick.
Oh my God, that is such a good phone.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the Sidekick.
Supposedly, they were going to bring it back. Like, as like a
Do you remember when they brought
thing?
it back as an Android phone for a while?
Yeah.
T-Mobile there?
Yep.
Like Sidekick 4G or whatever it was called. I
Yep.
remember I had that as a review in it for a while. I really dug it. But it lost the luster. It was Android, so it didn't feel the same, you know?
Right.
Even though, of course, Android is much more powerful and superior in what it could do.
Right.
Like the whole experience of the Danger OS was just like nothing could touch that.
No, it was so good.
It was so good. So optimized.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was a good phone. It was a fun phone. Just being able to slide it like that.
I hope you don't mind our reminiscing because 50 years of smartphone, 50 years of cell phone. It's amazing.
It is.
It's amazing. We're very lucky that we have this technology.
We've come a long way.
It's totally made everybody be able to access the world's information at their fingertips.
Yeah.
And you know, you look at what we're doing with AI now, the Chat GPT and the Bing and the Bard, and yeah, it's also kind of scary, but you know, you look at the power we have in our phones because we can do this on our phones.
Yeah.
Like you can literally have your phones generate like an essay for you or redo your resume.
Yep.
On your phone, guys.
Well, I mean, like, look at the Snapdragon Gen 2, right? The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is powerful enough to power that Asus gaming console.
I know.
But it's also a smartphone chip. Like, these are computers now. They're not just something that you call.
I know.
Make calls on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, your social media handle, your YouTube channel, all that good stuff?
It's just my name. On YouTube, just Jonathan Casey. On Twitter, it's Jonathan Casey YT for YouTube. It's super easy. And then on Instagram, it's Jonathan J. Casey.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you guys know where to find me on the internet. I'm Tank Girl, like the comic book character. Just drop all the vowels, TNKGRL. That's my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle. If you want to chat with me and Jonathan about this podcast, you have some thoughts, maybe tell us which was your first phone or first smartphone even. Tell us on Twitter, okay? And then if you want to see pretty pictures of phones, pretty pictures of cars, of food, of travel, of farm equipment for this week, go to my Instagram, right? And check it out. There's a bunch of cool stuff. I shoot everything with phones, so it's kind of fun. I tell you in the little description what phone I used. You know the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. If your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. It kind of helps for discovery. And then there's a couple of YouTube channels. I'm not remotely in the same league as you for YouTube. Like, I've had my channel for so long, and then I abandoned it when I worked at Engadget, and it totally killed it. And then I went back to it, and you know, it's okay, but it's not great. But anyway, there's a couple of channels. One is mostly unboxing videos, the reviews here and there. And it's like mostly the phones the personal audio and the wearables on the main channel. And then on the second channel, you get like the home automation, car tech, travel tech, like accessories and stuff like that. But you know how YouTube works. So, youtube.com/mobiletech-podcast and youtube.com/mobiletech-more. You can like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, and comment. You can comment about this podcast. I'll answer there. I'm happy to do that. And then, Patreon. So I mentioned it a few times through the show. I know there's not too many of you there, but if you want to see a video version of the podcast in advance of the audio version with, us showing some stuff around, check out the Patreon. There's also a tier to join the Discord server and a bunch of other stuff, goodies in there. So check it out. If you want to support me financially, this is the way to do it. It's a pretty easy way to consistently help me make this podcast happen. And then if you just want to do a one-time thing, I love a good cup of coffee. So maybe click through the link in the show notes. There's a link to PayPal for a donation, and you can give me $5 for coffee or whatever it is. Buy me lunch. I don't know. Buy me a trip to Hawaii. Wait, I go there every year with Qualcomm. Maybe I don't need a trip to Hawaii.
Which Qualcomm would send me to Hawaii.
Oh. If you're listening, Qualcomm, please send Jonathan to Hawaii.
I want to go to Hawaii.
There you go. So I also want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, Jonathan, for being my guest.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've been meaning to, and then you had a baby, which is like...
I'm so sorry about that.
No, I mean, that's more important.
But no, thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Great. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
So, folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.